Welcome, everybody. This is the July 24th, 2020 Board of Education special meeting. It is now 9:02 a.m. Heather, please conduct our board roll call.
Mr. Adams?
Here.
Mrs. Capo? Mrs. Case?
Here.
Mr. Kushner?
Here.
Mrs. Wolf?
Here.
Thank you, Heather. I'd like to move on to the approval of the agenda. You all have an agenda before you. I'll take any comments or changes or amendments to the current agenda. Seeing none, we'll move forward with the agenda as presented. Moving on to our first order of business, agenda item 2, discussion items. 2.1, fall start options.
Okay. First thing I want to say that reason we are still remote, we really haven't found a place to be able to go in person. That's probably appropriate this time and how to do that. Right now we're not allowed into the city. So we're trying to figure it out. Our boardroom is a little small. So I was hoping by August 11th that we would have at least that option. We may still not choose to do it, but we'll have that option. But right now it's not really an option. And so, but we'll look at ways that we have that as an option in the future. And meet the criteria that we need if the town facility is not available. We'll start. First thing is probably don't run the Facebook on this, but it's not really a decision. It's really about the plans today, and then the decisions will be made from those plans. And so, and I'll kind of explain that as we go. So I'll share my screen here, and I did practice this. All right, hopefully you're seeing a mechanical 3 item scale. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So as we move forward, actually I had a scale like this at my grandmother's house on her stove, the one warmth place in her house, the only source of heat. We'd back up against the stove, and my uncle had brought this scale back from Vietnam when he was over there as a soldier. And so I always played with this scale and trying to balance the 3 things. And my grandma wasn't really happy with that, but spent hours sitting in front of that warm stove trying to balance things on this. And that's kind of how I feel now, except I don't have the social emotional support of my grandma's house and the warm stove. So if you look at this, way I look at what we need to look at as we make decisions and plan for the school year, any school year actually, but this one is particularly challenging, is one of those scales has learning on it. One of those scales has the social and emotional and wellness of our students, and the third one has safety. And these are challenges in all times. We're always looking at ways to help our learning in many ways with social justice and equity and differentiation and all those things. We're also looking at how to increase the social emotional health of all of our students and staff. And of course, safety has always been an issue as well, as we've went through a lot of different things with that. COVID just escalates all this to higher levels and makes the division and the difficulty of all 3 of these balancing acts a little bit harder. So if we look at the learning part with COVID, and we have remote, we have hybrid, we have in-person learning. And so we have to look at what does that learning look like, and you look at what the students are in that learning capability. So we have to look at their age, what is the best way for them to learn. We have to look at where their support is. Do they have support at home? Do they not have support at home? Do we need to look at the curriculum? Do they have access to the curriculum at school, at home? What kind of curriculum does that look like? We have to look at supervision. Are they supervised? Are they supported? Is people there? Do they have access to help at home? And then of course, access to technology. We also have just their personalities as we look at remote learning and in-person learning. I've talked to most families that I talk to say, I have one kid that did very, very well on it. The other kid did really, really poorly with remote learning. And so some kids do better than others, and something it works for, some it does not, or is more difficult, I should say. And then just a differentiation of needs. Some students need added support, whether they're people in helping them or not, and need the support with that. So with that, what we have to look at was we look at the learning piece of it, is all those different things. Always have to do, but when you're looking at remote learning versus in-person learning, all of those escalate and become larger challenges. And then just the equity of that. The social emotional learning piece, the American Academy of Pediatrics actually came out in June saying that kids need to be in school. That's the safest place for them. And we need to figure that out. And they were looking at a lot of different categories with that. They felt that because of supervision, because of social interaction that students need, exercise, having access to food, and multiple social emotional supports that we're able to give at schools, that the safest place for students were at schools. Now, this is relative. At that point, some of the safety issues wasn't as extreme as they are now. So at that point, when they're balancing those two things on our scale, they felt the balance was in favor of having in-school learning. And that's something that some of the decision has to be. But when you have insecurities, as many of our families do, with not having meals or maybe not having supervision at home or the access to the learning opportunities, it becomes even more of an equity issue and something that we have to strive to handle in some way. And so, also, where are those students if they are not in school? Are they actually learning with someone supporting them, or are they being passed around from group to group, which could actually spread the virus, or maybe staying with their grandma or grandpa on some days and not some days, which is also problematic. So where are those kids? Right now, I would also be concerned that our high school students would actually still be working. I don't think if we go remote learning that they're going to quit their jobs. I think they're going to try to do their remote learning wherever they can do that. So that's going to be interesting, and still spreading the virus around and coming in groups. So I think there's a lot of different things that we have to take into consideration there as part of this balance. Okay. Then the third one is, of course, safety. And that one is troubling right now, as we see the increased spread and the increased cases even in Larimer County. And so that has to be balanced between those things. It can trump every one of those other things of the learning, the needs of the students, the supervision, everything else, if that becomes extreme enough. But where is that balance is where the really decision needs to be. So you kind of go from, is the safety issue on whether the student is vulnerable or they have vulnerable student at home, then they obviously should be at home, right? Is there a case in their family or near them, then they should be home. We should be home. And then you move from cases to outbreaks to community spread. All those increase the level of the insecurity, which of course decides the other two balances. So as the safety concerns increase, it limits the other balancing of the other two pieces on the scale. So that is what this is about. And so today, and the plan that we've put out is for 100% in-school learning, with, of course, options that if you have concerns that you can go at home. That is not a decision. That is a plan that we think that is the best case scenario. If our kids are here, we're going to have them as safe as possible. We're going to have our staff as safe as possible. Sometime we're going to be in that mode. It may be August 24th. It may be October. It might be January. It may be next August. But at some point, we're going to have to bring the kids back under conditions and make that as safe as possible. And so we need to have the PPE. We need to have plans on how to transport, how to get students in and out, how to do the things at school that we need to do under the best safe conditions anyway. We can always not do that, But if we don't have those things in place, we would not be able to move to that quickly. And so that was a lot of the planning and ordering and preparing was for, under the guidelines that we have, was for that. Now, some of the problems with making all these decisions is the science, right? There is very good science that young students, especially under 5th grade, do not spread the virus to each other very often, and also even don't get the virus as much, but they can be spreaders to adults. So there's pretty good, strong research on that, and it's pretty well been backed. Although we're very infant stages of the research here, and so sometimes that's frustrating at my job because a lot of the science that we have is first anecdotal, and then maybe small groups with variations. Some of the data is not even reported the same, so it's hard to do meta-analysis. And so as the experts, not me, the experts try to go through this, sometimes there is conflicting information. That's even if you pick the same source, you might have that, and there's obviously different sources. It is frustrating, it's hypocritical, it's hard to trust, because what we know about it is that it will change. And so this is sort of, I'm doing this kind of long background here because I think it's important that the decision isn't like yes or no or black or white. It's multiple layered, because one thing that you do can cause a safety issue somewhere else, or a safety issue here, or a learning issue here, can create a disruption of this balance that we're trying to do. So I would put on this scale that you have in front of you is the concern that I've mentioned with safety, social well-being and health of our students, and learning. And we're, as administrators and school board members, the top there, kind of holding those chains and seeing what that is. We have to try to make decisions to balance that. And the science and the information is sort of the base of what we're trying to make those decisions from, with the best knowledge that we have. And it's going to be challenging and changing and frustration with that. So that is kind of what I've spent a lot of time working on, probably too much, but that is what the decision make is really about. The plan is about how, if we make that decision, how we can do it the best possible way, right? And that is what we're going to do a lot of presentation today. So we know, and that's what we want to throw out there so we can get feedback from the board, from our community, from our teachers that they're very involved in this, of what that may look like, so we can feel safe if that is the case, if that is the decision we make. If we do not make that decision, that's okay too. But that is that decision if we make, we will be as safe as possible. Any questions on that?
No, it makes sense to me, and I think it will be necessary for that constant message to be out there that we have a plan that allows us to be very nimble and adjust to the ever-changing situation versus, like you said, we have a plan, not necessarily a decision.
Right. And, I think, obviously the faster we can make decisions under the information we have, the better it is to move forward and plan. So I don't want to undermine that. So last Wednesday, State of Colorado, working with local health agencies and as well as CDHP and also the federal government with CDC, came out with some guidance for us to open school and some philosophy with that. And so they laid that out just last Wednesday. And this is kind of where they have given us guidance on. And they are under maybe what you're familiar with the stay-at-home order, which what we were in last spring in March when most businesses were closed down. We were closed down, and you're supposed to stay home as much as possible. We moved to safer at home, I think sometimes in May or June, which opened up things a little bit and got some more businesses open and increased the amount because things were getting a little bit better. Along with the safer at home, Larimer County put in a variance, which allowed us to have graduation. And that variance is not, allows for 50 people inside versus 10, some of those sort of things. But it's a variance to the safer at home order because we are doing pretty well in our county. That variance is under review right now. It is I guess what you call probation. We have not met the metrics. There's actually a piece in the paper today about that. There's also a piece in the paper from Tom Gonzalez, our local thing on schools. So I encourage you to read those. So that variance is in flux, and that could affect our businesses. It doesn't necessarily affect our schools too much because we'd still be in the safe at home part of the system. And then if things got better and we could open up more and put rules on, we was hoping that by August, and at one time in June, they felt very strongly about this, that we would be in the protect your neighbors phase. As you know, with national and state increase, that is becoming more and more difficult. So the goal of this is, because we know that in-person learning is important, that the goal of this plan was how can we do that at the safest level, and what area could we get that in-person learning going, and what is reasonable, right? How do we balance those things that I mentioned, that we value the social emotional wellness of our students and the learning process, and also understand the complex and the equity issues that we have within all of our families. But how do we do that safely, and what level do we not do it? So their guidance is, again, they are going on to the pediatrics guidance that younger students are risk transmission is very small between young children, even to young children and adults. And so they're going on that idea. They're also going on that, yeah, of course, the mitigation factors are very important, have proven to be safe. And so they really look at the mitigation tactics for all students would be important. And so they're looking at how could you go to school and be at lowest risk. Of course, one of the big things that we are all aware of is the 6 foot distancing, and also the duration of that 6 foot distancing. So if you can stay away from people for 6 foot for less than 15 minutes, so it isn't like you just pass by somebody, of course, it really reduces the risk. Don't eliminate the risk, but it lowers the risk. So when we do our planning for having students in school at any level, maybe at 50% capacity or 100% capacity, this is what we would be looking at as ways to how do we do the 6 foot distancing and duration of time. Movement, so people aren't crowded in areas and those sort of things, and how do you get students in and out and not congestion areas. So we've worked very hard of figuring out how to stagger lunches, have lunchroom, have students in their classrooms eating, how we're working on how to phase in bringing students in on bus, not having kids enter in the same doors, same buildings, and those sort of things. So we're really working on the movement and the congestion areas, shut down all lockers, all those sort of things that we, of course, consider risks. The third thing is that earlier in the year, I didn't know where masks would be, but right now we feel that it's a state order, but also that the best possible way is that everybody wear masks, and that would be required. Some schools are not making it required. I think that we can. Of course, you have exceptions for health concerns, but the information we have is very strong that masks on both individuals, or all individuals, has a significant decrease of the chance of the virus spreading. Group size, cohorting, getting students in smaller groups. Our administrators have worked extremely, extremely hard, and with our teachers, and figured out ways to limit our group sizes, get our group sizes down as much as we could possibly can, and keep them in cohorts so we know what students are, and be able to trace and track if we needed to. All that we've done an amazing job at that, and I think we can do that. One thing that you're going to see different in our plan versus some of the larger schools' plans is they have sort of stay at home. Stay at home is a pretty simple plan. we can't have school, kids are going to be home, but also the parents are going to be home because most of the businesses are shut down. And so everybody's kind of home like we were last spring. And so some of those supervision and some of that access to adults is a lot better in that situation, even though we're in a lockdown. But our plan, because we're a small school, because we have the room, and because we have the willingness of our teachers to work with us, we feel that we don't have to go to an A-B hybrid model. We don't have to bring in half the kids on one day and half the kid on the other, because we're able to do the small group size without doing that and the situation. So whether we are in the safer at home hybrid model or not the hybrid model, and we have sort of a hybrid model in the high school with some online classes and not, is the fact is that we're able to do that whatever phase that we are in. If we're in school, we are able to do the group sizing very, very well. And I'm proud of our administrators and teachers for working through that. And of course, respiratory output. This is one that we're still working on and is very concerning. There is a huge decision-making on band, vocal music, those sort of things, and some concerns there. And we right now would have a difficult time handling that under current situation, but we're trying to work through that and figure out the best we could. Going outside, extreme social distancing, some of the options that we have on that. But that is a large concern of band and vocal music in our system. And then, of course, reduce access to touching everything or sharing items. And we've bought extra items and cleaning protocols, and trying to keep kids in the same room in a limited space is all important. And this also goes to our cohorting as well. If we can keep certain kids together, then if there is an outbreak, it is contained to a lot smaller group. It can be contained quickly, and we can keep the spread from moving throughout our school and throughout our community. So that's very important to us, and that's part of our plan, major part of our plan as well. So this kind of goes through all the things that I've kind of talked through there, and you're welcome to, of course, look at that and go with that. So our big things are that we are going to have masks on everyone that possibly can. We also have other barriers as well. We are looking at the advantage of pre-K, K1, possibly what the disadvantage of masks are. There are some good evidence that maybe that isn't necessary, and the masks are problematic with kids that young. And the research says that may not spread. We are investigating that. We also bought plexiglass things that could split up those kids. So with plexiglass support, which has been recommended, and we have those ordered as well. So we're trying to balance that, what makes sense with our students. That is a big part of our plan. So if we are to stay at home, we're to stay at home again. Most of the businesses will be shut down, so I feel more comfortable that our parents and older siblings would be home as well, and we'd be similar to we were back in March. If we go to that route, our major support would be, hey, let's do a really good job. Let's learn from what we did with our remote learning opportunities. Let's make that as best and robust as possible, and we want to do that anyway because we'll have students in and out, in online learning anyway. And we also, of course, if we have a case, we could be sent home for a week or 2 weeks or so on with that. So we want to make that as robust as possible in our remote learning. Safer at home, like I say, we are sort of, in what other bigger schools would say, a hybrid model, because we're able to do exactly what they're doing in their hybrid model with all students here. Of course, give the option that students still have the choice, and parents still have the choice. If they choose not to come to our school for whatever reasons, that we would support them 100%, and they are part of our students and want to make them inclusive and welcome as possible, but they do have a choice to stay home and without question and without a reason. But if they are here, that we can do cohorting, we can do social distancing, we can stop large group gatherings, and we can use cleaning protocols and masks that we feel that we could do a very good job under these guidelines and meet the guidelines, as well as having a hybrid model. And really, if we go to protect your neighbor, we'd be in that same mode. We would not probably change out of that for a while until the vaccines are done and we're back to other type of learning. We feel like that our safer at home plan would probably be very similar. We might be able to get more access to interventionists, more adults in with the students and those sort of things. But we'd really try to stay with the same concept of social distancing, cohorting, limited access within that phase as well, as long as it made sense. And that's pretty well what ours do. Of course, there's other things involved with that, not allowing outside people in, visitors, even parents, dropping students off and not be able to bring their kids into the rooms just to spread it, how we would handle illnesses. Today, we are supposed to get, this is a big question of the scenarios of if we have an outbreak, what happens, and the health department is working on that. So if someone gets it, what would that protocol look like? And that would be really kind of run by them, and the testing and the quarantines and all that would be really ran by the health department and working with us, and we would follow those. One thing I didn't mention is also that we had asked our teacher, our staff, and our students to self-screen at home. Fever isn't a high indicator with elementary students, especially, and even all students, but it's still a factor. And of course, if you feel sick, you shouldn't come to work. But all staff would definitely have to be that. And so we had asked people to be screened. If they couldn't screen at home, we would screen them at school. We have the thermometers bought. We have procedures in place to be able to do that and track that as a secondary precaution with that. And we talked about lunches being in the rooms, not gathering kids together, or if they are outside the room in the lunchroom, that they would be in their cohort groups and not mixture with other students. And then we're working on transportation as well. We're supposed to get some direction today from our local health department of what that could look like. It will be mandatory masks for sure, we know. It kind of depends on how many people can sit in seats, and they have, with masks, double masking all students, they feel like they can increase the numbers there significantly. And then of course, give students options, give parents options. We want people to feel safe. We want people to, what works for them. If something works for them, they should be able to do it. We also want to make sure that we have the equity and access issue for all students to learn the best possible way they can under the safest conditions. Any questions?
Nope, that last kind of multicolored border, that was what was sent out or posted on our school's Facebook pages and sent out recently, correct?
Yeah, so communication is we sent that out to give feedback, see what people thought, see what reaction we would get. If you've seen some of the larger school, I think Jeffco's on their 5th plan as of yesterday, and St. Brain changed theirs yesterday, and so on. So, and we'll probably have to adjust ours. I'm not saying it's perfect. Sometimes
right.
We work so hard on this, and then all of a sudden you look at something, wow, I never thought that. That's like so obvious, and I never thought of it, right? And we'll have that. We'll have that moment when we thought we had things under control, and something that we did works opposite of the way we thought it did. And so I do want to say the flexibility, but we wanted feedback. We want to say, if we're in school, this is what we think is safe, right? But there are conditions, and you also, that you have the option and the choice that you feel uncomfortable that there are other choices. But if it is also run by what we think the safety issue is on this one side, it's kind of the sliding scale of what this looks like. And so that safety is really what the decision is. What do we think? Kids in school or out of school? If they're in school, this is how they would be safe. If they're out of school, then this is the most robust system and support that we can give them. And so that's what we have to work on, is those two options. And there's something that could always be in between. Maybe we bring in students of high risk or whatever under the safe conditions and limit that. I mean, we can move in between those two things with certain needs that we see as necessary, or certain needs that should come up, or opportunities. So that is the way that we are trying to do it. Again, the in school takes the most planning, the most pre-ordering, the more changing schedules, and all those sort of things. And so that's where we're headed right now.
Yeah. Thank you. I think the plan looks like a really solid base that seems like you've addressed most everything that we can think of here at the moment. But this, as I understand it, the idea is to put this out there and then we start to collect input from our community, parents, staff to see what they think, and then we may need to make adjustments from there.
Right, and I'd like to, just say that our administrators have really not taken any days off, and they have just worked extremely hard on this and trying to interpret the information and looking at their schools. I'm gonna have Ruby talk about that. I was gonna have her right now, but Laszlo's come in and he has a meeting at 10, I think. And so I'll let Laszlo talk about the remote learning opportunity, give you an update on it, and then we will try to go back to Ruby and talk about how the schools are working with the health department and answer any questions on what this would look like exactly in our school, in our contract. That makes sense.
Very good. Thank you. It looks like you guys have done a fantastic job, and it obviously shows a tremendous amount of effort put in.
Yeah, thanks for all your hard work.
Laz, are you here? I haven't looked. Okay, since he is not here, I guess we'll move right to
He is.
Ruby.
Then.
Oh, yes.
There he is.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if I could do that myself or not. Am I able to share screen,
Yep.
Heather?
I've marked you as co-host.
Okay, cool. So let me do that really quick. Hi, good morning, everybody. Hopefully this works. If not, we'll punt. Does that work? Okay, we'll see. Not sure what's going on there. Okay. I'm getting some kind of weird privacy thing, Heather, so I'm not sure if it's.
Is it in?
It's in, yeah, it's coming up with security privacy. I'm just seeing if I can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, record comments.
I need to remind everybody, if you're not speaking, can you put yourself on mute? It helps with any background noises.
All right. Yeah, I'm afraid if I do this, it'll kick me out. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk. I had a PowerPoint I was going to go over with the board, but I can definitely send it later on. Yeah, it's not working. Sorry, I'm not sure what's going on, but it says if I do, it's making me quit Zoom, which would be probably hard for you to see anything if I did that. So, so I'll kind of just talk a little bit about the online remote learning. And the presentation I was going to share with you is what I've been sharing with parents. I'm actually meeting with another group of parents here at 10 to go over kind of a question and answer session. So I will kind of go through generally what I've talked to them about, so you have an idea of what this looks like. But in general, Sheldon and I started talking about developing an online pathway, in particular for high school. Long before COVID-19, we had been kind of kicking this around for quite a while, and we're kind of getting ready to start launching something possibly for this school year or the next, mainly at the high school. And so once all these things happened and our closures, we were, kind of moved a little faster and decided we would make this an option for our district. And so with that, I began doing a bunch of research and, what's the best program, what's going to work, how do we want to do this? And we landed on Florida Virtual Academy. It's a very well vetted curriculum. It's been used for over 20 years. It is used throughout the state of Colorado right now. I think Thompson and St. Vrain are both using it for their online programs this year as well. So definitely a high level product, well renowned and vetted and cost effective. It was $192 per student, and that allowed that student to have unlimited coursework for a year. So it was really pretty nice price point for that, and very little setup charge. I think it's $1,000 to set the whole thing up. So talked to Sheldon, and we had COVID resources that we used to kind of get this launched and get things rolling. So in my discussions with parents, I kind of go through with them what online learning is and the difference between online learning and what we had in the spring with Cloud School, and what we may also have continuing if we have closures this year with Cloud School. And that's that online learning is developed specifically for delivery online. And so the actual curriculum and presentation of the materials is designed to be interactive and for students to be able to access it in an asynchronous manner. So they have the ability to get on and do their work and develop their schedule, their daily schedule, and work at their own pace, at their own time of day, all those things. There are some limited synchronous experiences, which would be like classroom meetings or probably conferences with the teacher, video conference. But for the most part, the curriculum is more self-paced, so students would work through that at their level, at their pace, on their schedule. Trying to remember because I don't have my PowerPoint in front of me, but the other pieces I go over is the difference, the kind of the role of the parent, because the parent in the online learning environment has the role of a learning coach. And what that means is that not only are they providing supervision and safety, but I kind of explain that students aren't in front of their computers with somebody talking to them. The parents are really going to be helping the student with time management, with organization of materials, with making sure they have the right supplies, and also helping them communicate. And so we kind of go through those pieces. I do a myth busting section where we talk about the fact that people think there's this myths out there about online learning being not as rigorous as in person, and that's untrue. It actually is just as rigorous, and it also has the added benefit of teaching students to organize and time manage and things like that they have to do in that environment. Talk about colleges. The myth is that colleges don't like this. They don't like to see this on transcripts and such, and that's not true either. It's very well respected among college acceptance. And for this year, the way we're going to be doing this is the students will actually be affiliated or enrolled in their neighborhood school or the school they would have went to, elementary, middle, or high. And so their transcript, which really doesn't matter too much until high school, will reflect that they're taking these courses through the school. So it'll look like whatever courses they took are issued through our high school. I do talk about the curriculum, and it is a different curriculum. It's it's normed to the national standards and state standards. So when a student completes a year of online curriculum, they will be in the same place that they would have been if they took in-person instruction. But with that, the caveat I talk about is the pacing and the delivery is different. And so it's not something we could come in and out of. It's not something that just is, you could do a month of this and go to school and then come back and do a month. That would cause a lot of gaps for students. So I ask parents to make, and we put this in our original communication, that we're really looking for a minimum of a semester commitment, ideally a year. So I kind of push that it's better if they are able to plan this and stay in it for the year, because that's going to be the most cohesive way to go. But we understand that things might change and parents may make a different decision. So we're willing to work with that and accommodate them if we need to. Obviously, they could always come back to our in-person school. We would never say no, but I want to make it clear that it's not something that we're trying to really avoid having students jump in and out. We really want to get parents to make decisions and stick with them if we can. Helps us, it helps the schools with their planning as well. We talk about the teachers. This is a curriculum piece that we're purchasing, not the teaching. So if you look on Florida Virtual online, the resource materials, I send them to the Florida site because it's all there and available for them to look at. And I'm working on getting a demo so that I could send out to interested parents who want to just get in there and check out classes. So I'm hoping to get that out here in the next couple of days. I'm waiting for that from them. But in the meantime, there is, in Florida, they run this as a statewide option. So that confused some people because they thought, oh, do I have to pay the tuition if I'm not in Florida? Do I have to follow the Florida rules? And so I've been clarifying that we're purchasing the curriculum, almost like we're buying the books, but then our teachers are going to be delivering that. So our teachers will be the people really in charge of making sure that students are making progress. The third myth is that there's no support. And I talked about the fact that we're going to have in-person teachers, Estes Park teachers are going to be assigned. Elementary will probably be one teacher, but as they get up to secondary, we're looking at, and I'm working with Chuck and Ruby and Janet on models where we have more content-based folks. So they'd have maybe 2 or 3, depending on how many classes they're taking. They'd have a social studies expert, science expert, math and language arts kind of content expert, and those people would be teaching coursework. And so they may have up to 4 teachers that are go-to folks for them at the secondary level, probably 1 at the elementary would be how that would look. And then the attendance piece, that came up as one of the myths as well, is that, there's no deadlines. You just sign up and you go. And that's not true at all. There's a great monitoring system within what we're purchasing that allows us not only to know when kids are logged on, which isn't really a great measure because they may not be working, but it allows us to measure their progress in the course. So we can see how many assignments they've completed and what percentage of the course they've completed. So our teachers will be working on setting goals with students on, you should be at this percentage in this course and this percentage in this course by this point in the year. And so that was another piece that we talked about. And I did speak a little bit to the high school schedule because it's a little different, and what the recommendations that are coming out of online learning are for high schoolers is that it is not good for them to have 6, 7, 8 separate classes going for the entire year. It's hard for them to manage the workload with that. And what Florida recommends, and what I've seen this on multiple online programs, and actually I think Sheldon sent out something, the states even made some recommendations of scheduling this way for in-person because it could help your cohorts be smaller, is high school students in particular would take intensives. So we would have them enrolled in, I'll give you an example, they might take an entire year of chemistry in the fall and an entire year of US history in the fall. And so their schedule would look like 3 classes or 4 classes, but they're more intensive. So they're working through those 3 or 4 classes, semester changes, and they go to another 4 classes, kind of like college, if you can imagine it that way. So that's the recommendation for high school. I need to talk more with Ruby and Chuck about what they want to do with their blended classes, and if we want to start thinking scheduling that way. I'm not sure we are, but for the online only students, we'll probably look at that because that's really recommended for them. Let's see, what else am I leaving out? Technology, I'm asking parents to be able to, they really need to have a computer, desktop or laptop. The recommendations are really to have a computer. This will work on an iPad, but it's not the ideal scenario for online. So I'm pushing hard that they have some kind of computer. We do have a plan to provide computers for families that don't have the means to do that. And they obviously need internet, and I'm recommending a printer of some type to be able to print materials if they need to. And then I go over kind of what the profile of an online learner is and just give them some thoughts about online learning being different. And there's a lot of students really have to advocate, they have to communicate. And it looks different. If first grader's not going to be emailing their teacher directly, there's probably going to be a parent coach working with them on that. But even into middle school, high school, upper elementary, we start to see that, we want students to kind of take charge of that, because that's an important part of them being successful, is knowing they've got to be part of that role and communicating and working with their teacher. There's no cost. This is where district's covering the cost of this for families. The only associated cost would be school supplies. And the AP courses there are some nominal like $20 ebook charges and things like that for some of the AP courses. So we'll have to, I basically share parents that might be a charge that they have to incur, but we'll work with them on that. But for the most part, it's free of charge for our families. And let's see, last piece is around 2 pieces around scheduling. A lot of questions have come up of can we take classes in the building as well, and which is kind of odd because I'm thinking some of these people are wanting to do it for health reasons, but then other places so it's interesting. But what I've been sharing with that is, and I think it's important, I think Sheldon kind of led with this when he transitioned, is these students are enrolled in our district. It's not a separate school at this point in time. So we want to make all efforts to provide them access to anything that we would provide access to our in-building students, knowing there's going to be limitations. So I've been, sharing with parents that band and choir is the big one, because we have a strong band and choir program, and we have a lot of kids that are very invested, and for whatever reasons they're choosing, don't want to be in the in-person, but still want to remain somehow involved with band or choir. And so we're looking at how do we do that. That's definitely we're not saying no to that. We're saying yes until we have to say no. So obviously we're going to include those students in the planning. It's just going to be determined by what we can do with those courses. And that's come up for the most part, just band and choir. I think there was one inquiry about a CTE class. So sort of case by case on that. As far as the plan, the other questions that have come up pretty regularly with the parent group is services for students that might have an IEP, a 504, gifted, talented. And so my response to that is, again, we don't want to put barriers in place for this, especially for this year. This might change in the future, but this year we want this to be an option for all of our families, and we're going to work with them on it. With the IEP, I do share with them that there would be an IEP meeting that would have to happen and be, and we'd have to really look at that. And if the student just couldn't access the material due to their disability, we'd have to develop a plan that, what is this going to look like? I am preparing to have some in-person services available that would accommodate some of the students that are remote, where they come into like the admin building or another place and get certain services. So kind of keeping that in mind and building that on the side, knowing that might come up. But we have to do I keep using the word reasonable, the 504 terminology, reasonable accommodations, reasonable services, and I'll work with parents as partners. We'll have to sit down together and say, is this actually going to work? And this is what it needs to look like for your child, and this is what they're going to need to be able to be successful. I think that's it. I want to leave time for questions. I think I covered all the big pieces, and I will send the PowerPoint to Heather so she could share it with you. And it just has all the information and with prettier pictures that I just went through. So you have that available. But any questions in general at this point? We do have, we're crossing over 85 families that have expressed interest. Just to give you a sense of numbers. That doesn't mean there's, and what I've done is developed a list that I'm sharing with the principals, because they're obviously trying to make their plan and what students are going to be in building or not. I have not really, I've given our parents a deadline of registration timeframe. Like, we'd really like to know by registration, but my philosophy is I feel like pressuring people right now is not a good thing to do. And so what I've basically been saying, if you, as early as you know, and you really feel confident in your answer, let us know. But we also don't want you to feel pressured. And if you need to take time to make this decision, or want to see where things are at closer to when school starts, we understand. Our drop dead is going to be when school starts, because I'm planning on starting this program. Once we really get our firm, I'm going to look at our dates. Our staggered starts and stuff have affected things a little bit, but once we have our actual full day of everyone's in school, this is our first full day where everyone in person is at the buildings going. I'm going to put the online option 1 week from that as our start date. So there's a little bit of flexibility in there if we need to do some last minute changes with students coming over to the online based on whatever. And then we're going to kind of sort of close it off around mid-September as an end, but probably earlier than that, so we know kind of where we're at. So I'll work with you guys and Sheldon on probably more details around that, because that could get a little bit tricky. Technically, I don't know that we could ever close it off, but we're going to have to come up with some language that we feel like we're all comfortable with on saying this is kind of our deadline. So
What's the curriculum like as far as, let's say, global outcomes or problem solving, critical thinking, or is it mostly pretty content driven?
It's mostly content driven, but a lot of the global outcomes, I think, are met in the online format because there's a lot of advocacy, communication. I mean, in the PowerPoint, you'll see the online learner description, and there's perseverance in there because they have to work through things, and they don't have the immediate adult in the room, to go to and say, hey, help me with this. They actually have to come up with strategies to solve problems and to communicate. So I think a lot of our global outcomes are going to be met in the actual process and format of the learning. And then very interactive. So there's a lot of, if you go, and I'll send you guys the demo too when I get that so you could take a look. But there's, they do a lot with using video and TED Talks and all kinds of different ways to really get high interactive type of material. And then the students have to do a lot of reading and writing. There's a lot of old school kind of academics that's not all in front of the computers. A lot of things they have to do off the computer, and a lot of assignments that they work on that are more independent oriented. So I think it'll fit nicely with what we're trying to do with our global outcomes as far as building learners.
Great,
And
thanks. Thanks for all your hard work.
Les, out of all the 85 that are expressing interest in the online program,
Yep.
how does that break down between the elementary, middle, and high?
We are definitely having a higher number of elementary right now. It's interesting. I would say kind of our biggest bubble is actually the younger elementary, first grade, second grade. We have a few kindergarten. We actually have a preschool request, which I'm working through to think through. It's a student with a significant health issue who would probably be in our preschool, but it may not be able to be. So that's a little bit of a creative one, but a chunk of them are elementary right now that have kind of committed and said so I would say we're probably going to see a larger group from the elementary, which is interesting, but. Yeah.
Laszlo, more of a statement to make sure that I understand it correctly as well. The Florida Virtual is not necessarily it's not an either or. It's strenuously recommended that you stay in it at least one semester, a year preferably. However, if circumstances change with a family or something, they're 2 months into a semester, of course it would be brought back into the school. It's just that the strenuous part of committing is the continuity of instruction. Would that be a correct statement?
Correct. And when I share it, one of the things I say is that this is a pathway for folks who, a lot of what we're doing in our schools is changing. It's changing a lot, and it's gonna continue to change. And so this is a pathway for folks that if they want to sort of get off that train and say, okay, I'm just going to do this for the year or the semester, and I'm not as linked to the school plan. This is part of why we were creating this, is so we would have that avenue. But absolutely, I had one family that both of the parents are essential. One's a nurse and one's a police officer or something along that line. And they said they're really working on whether they can do this, but they said if we get to a point where it's not working, is it an option for our? Absolutely, we'll always be able to bring a student back in. That I don't see any issues with that. I think we have to keep that door open. I'm just trying to avoid the in and out, because the in and out is where we could get ourselves in trouble. Plus, I'll say this here, I'm not saying this to parents, but there's also a cost piece to it. If, once a student's in for 14 days, we pay for that. We can't transfer that license to another student. So we're paying for that. And it's not a huge amount of money, but it starts to add up. If we get in and out, we'll wind up, I think, hurting financially from it. So we're trying to be consistent with, you're here, and then if you have to leave, we know that there's circumstances that might come up for that. I think it'd be okay if students leave at semester. They'd be in a good spot. The only ones we'll have to watch is those high schoolers, and I'll be working with the counselors closely, especially high school, to make sure we're aligning. The other piece I didn't talk about is there are a lot of courses offered through online that are not necessarily offered through our buildings. So that's a deeper conversation we need to have. As far as what I've been sharing with parents is that we'll offer everything that they can take in the building, which we do have everything except for AP Physics. So that'll be one we have to figure out. And I think they're going to do that online anyway, so that shouldn't be a problem. but there are courses like Latin and certain other ones that aren't necessarily offered at our schools. And so if students want those, I'm basically saying to parents, that might be a possibility, but I have to see what our teaching staff is. We know we'll be able to offer you the same thing you would have gotten in high school. These other things may be available. We just have to see if we are able to support those. So we're going to be able to say, here's the courses that are available, and then the parents choose from them. It may not be the full catalog, but I'm shooting for it because honestly, it's kind of nice, especially for gifted learners. They could take things that they might not have been able to take in the school. So there's some advantages to that. It's kind of a building the plane while we fly it moment, though, I have to tell you, because yeah, we just got our contract 2 weeks ago, and so we're just really learning a lot as we go through.
Lazo's been amazing. I mean, he's literally spent all summer on this because we looked at a lot of different options. There's some state options we're looking at and may blend in at some point and everything else, but it's just amazing what he's done. And so I appreciate all that and working through it and having all these parent meetings. I also want to say that this is a little different than if we go remote learning cloud school.
Yeah.
That is a different option in between. I mean, we are really trying to be flexible and nimble and give different options and be able to adjust. And we are keeping a lot of flexibility at this time with all of our programming, because we know that it's a difficult time and some of it isn't clear. So I appreciate his willingness to do it, and also his flexibility and nimbleness, and also the principles, because this is a tough situation to do at any time, and under the circumstances we have now, it's even more. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Laz, you have a meeting in 2 minutes, correct?
Yeah, I've been doing parent info meetings every day, and we've had really good show-up and really good questions. Our families are being very thoughtful. They're being very kind. They're being very. I've heard a lot of good feedback around how we've handled this situation from the start, and they're very patient. So overall, I'd say 95% of the parents that I've had in the meetings and have been talking with they're just trying to find the right solution for their families. And I think our message is that we're here and we're trying to offer everything we can offer to help this be the most successful year we can build for students with the circumstances we have.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll let you go, get to your other meeting, and thank you
you,
so
guys.
much, Laz.
Have
All
a
right,
good one.
on
Take
to
care.
discussion item 2.
Laura,
The calendar PD days.
Laura, can I ask a couple more questions about this? Lazo, I think you can go. I think Ruby or Sheldon can probably handle these.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of them, if we go back to full remote, full cloud school, are kids going to stay in the Florida virtual school? Would they go back?
Yeah, if we go into full clouds, the kids that are enrolling in the Florida virtual would stay pretty much in that pathway. The cloud school would be the option for rolling closures. So if we have to close for 3 weeks,
Right.
students would move to cloud school, then would move back to in-person. So they wouldn't move to Florida virtual.
Okay. Yeah, I think your point before about keeping kids kind of consistent, fewer transitions is better than back and forth and back and forth. But,
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have like a minute if you want to. I told Pam, usually it takes about 3 to 4 minutes for everyone to actually get into those Zoom
Okay.
meetings. As you can imagine, so I have another minute or two.
Okay.
So then just real quick, I've had some questions about why we chose this model. You mentioned that it was really well vetted, but I think a little bit more explanation about why this was the best choice.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of options out there. And we were working pretty close with CEL, which I'll let Sheldon explain that. That's the statewide initiative. And when the state decided to go with it. And so when they decided to go with it, I thought, and then watching all these large districts around us going with it, it was kind of like not peer pressure, like, oh, the big guys are doing it. But I was like, yeah, this looks really good to me. I spent some time with them. And then when the state with CEL said, okay, we're going to utilize Florida virtual for all of our elementary, because elementary is what I was most worried about. Secondary is pretty solid no matter which program you choose. Elementary, this is the only one that had a vetted K2 option to it. Most of them only have the three and above.
Okay.
Except for I think K12 has that now. But so anyway, once the state went with that and they adopted Florida virtual as theirs, and I'm looking at going, okay, well, we can pay the state a per course fee, which is going to be way more than, it was almost like a no-brainer, because it was like, well, they're doing it for the statewide one, so let's just go directly to the source and get all the resources we can get for our cost with that. So that was kind of the last straw. We were weighing different ones. We didn't have time to do a full kind of RFP. That would have been nice.
Right.
But with weighing the different options we had and knowing what was out there, it just seemed like it made the best sense at the time. And it's a 1-year contract. So if we decide, we want to move in a different direction, we can. And also, I just want to add, and I'll jump off here, I'll get out of your guys' hair. But we are planning, if this is successful, we'd like to continue offering something like this in the future. Whether it's K-12 or not, we'll determine. But I think we should consider having some kind of online pathway, because we do have a lot of families in Estes that choose this and go to a different district to do it. So I think it's a good thing for us to think about long term as well.
All right.
Good questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All
And the
right.
rules will be different if we do it next year. The rules right now allow us to count them as part of our students in here. Next year would be a whole different situation, possibly, assuming that we're back to normal as we can be. So, but we definitely want to consider as options. So it is different than Cloud School. We also vetted it through another group. We work with a group, and Ruby can probably talk to this. We asked them that work internationally with online courses of what they recommended. We didn't give them any names or anything else, and it was their top 3 as well. Online don't work for some people, and I know that you can get bad reviews, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. All school doesn't work for some people sometimes. So, but for the most part, it was heavily vetted by us, and probably really for almost 6 months, because we were starting this process even before this went in. So again, but it isn't perfect, and it isn't the best fit for all people, and I appreciate that.
All right. Any other questions for Sheldon or Ruby about the online option?
I could add a little bit to your question there, Danielle. I think maybe it sparked from, I know we had a parent who posted or shared a link on Facebook about the Florida Virtual Academy from the Consumer Reports. It had 16 reviews, and it was a 2 out of 5 star rating. So I went ahead and did some more research. And that was one review site. It had a 4.1 out of 5 reviews on Facebook with 288 people reviewing it. And then on thegreatschools.org, it had 66 reviews with a 4 out of 5 rating. When I took a look at that link that she shared with the 16 reviews and read through the ones that were negative, they were actually almost all linked to either a logistical thing or specific staff members involved or teachers involved that they had a negative experience with. Yeah. Know that the option that we're choosing with Florida Virtual Academy is that it is our staff that will be the teachers monitoring. So we are using our staff members. So I just wanted to add that because I know that's out there in our parent population, and they looked at that same site.
Okay, yeah, that's good to reinforce that it's going to be our local staff that will be monitoring this and working with our kids. I think that's a big piece for families too.
All right. Ruby, would you like to add to the false start options discussion? Kind of go back to discussion item 2.1.
Yeah, I think I was going to share today just to give you guys a little bit more information about how our walkthrough with the Larimer County Department of Health and Environment went and what we did, and so allow you to ask questions about that. Is that what you want to hear today? Am I on track there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Go back to part 1, but we didn't get to hear from you before we went to the
okay, cool. That's yeah, I'm happy to share and answer any questions that you have. I'll just add, I know that we're in a global pandemic and we're trying to open public schools for in-person learning, and this is a really monumental task. And we're offering for all of the students in our district this 100% online learning, because we know that when we go to 100% online learning for all of the students in our district, it creates a large equity gap for a large number of our students that would not be in line with our vision for a school district. Our students have such drastically different opportunities when they're at home learning, like the household environment they're in, the support they have in the household. We have many students that have single parent homes and that parent is working, the education level of the household, the language spoken in the household, the internet access, the internet speed, the internet capabilities to stream video. and just all the resources they have available at home. So, you know, we are offering this 100% online option because there are families out there that do have the capability and they do have the capacity to do that for their children. They might have a parent that stays home. Some families will and they should choose the online option because they're able to, and their students will be successful in the online option. And that's going to decrease the number of students we have in our buildings, allowing us to provide in-person learning for those that don't have that, that access and capability, and then we can combat that equity gap. So I just wanted to say that because the online option right now for many families is a good choice if they have the ability to provide that for their student, and that if their student is going to be successful. So I just wanted to add that if we don't provide in-person learning for many of our students, we will create a larger equity gap for them. So.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's been something that's been heavy on my heart through this whole thing, is the socioeconomic privilege equity. You know, not all families have the same privilege. So thank you.
Yeah. So with that said, I just want you to know that we're not just opening to in-person learning. We're opening to in-person learning with a plan, a really good plan. And partners in that plan is the health department. And so they came up and they did a walkthrough, and they spent 3 hours with us, 2 representatives, Katie and Brandon. Brandon focuses more on the sanitation and food distribution and services, and Katie is more on the transmission in the virus part of public health and environment and safety. So we had both of those 2 consultants walk through with our whole principal team, and Laszlo joined us, and Dave Colson joined us as well. And what we did is we started at the high school, then we went to the middle and the elementary, and we looked at our classrooms. We went into several different classrooms. We measured desks, we set out desks, we talked through what instruction will be like. We modeled and role played instruction, and talked about face coverings, and we got lots of good advice from the health department. And you know, together we're making these decisions, and we would never open in-person learning with a plan that's not approved by them or advised by them. And in some places, we're planning to go beyond what they're recommending. For example, the high school, they were perfectly okay with our desks being 5 or 5.5 feet apart, and class sizes of 20. Or a little more. We're not going to do that. We're going to get our class sizes down to 15 because we just want to go beyond the safety measures of this. You know, they stress that if you can get them down to 15, and you can spread those desks 6 or more feet apart, and wear face coverings, that you are doubling up on those measures. You know, so they said, you know, our students could actually take their face coverings off, but we're not going to. We're having them keep that face covering on, with the exception that we know it's hard to breathe into a face covering all day. And so if they are talking, it will be on. If they need a break, they can pull it down if it is silent work time, individual work time at their desk, and they're physically distanced 6 feet or more apart from other students. But as soon as they're collaborating with each other and speaking, we've just increased the risk of aerosol spreading, and the face covering will go back up. So, you know, we understand that, and we're being realistic about face coverings for the entire day, but being very strong on our high expectations about having them on at all times, and knowing why, understanding why, and understanding when it's okay to take them down and have a breath when you're not speaking to anybody, when you're individually working at your desk. So I know that face coverings are a large concern for a lot of parents, whether they wouldn't want them to wear them or not wear them. So I just wanted to kind of speak to that we're going beyond the measures that the health department is advising us on our walkthrough. We walked through our common areas, and they talked with us about removing all the furniture, so no common gatherings, and gave us a lot of good advice there. We walked through our areas where we plan to have choir and band. And right now, in those choir and band areas, if we cannot do choir and band outside, then there won't be any singing or playing in the indoors environment. So we've been talking with our choir and band teachers about that, and they would right now, like those kids really spread about 25 feet apart if we're outside. So we're going to be using a lot of space and land for those, but we're also getting those class sizes really small. So it'll be a small group of students. We walked through what we planned for our lunch grab and go or hot lunch delivery and in the classrooms, and they were really happy about what we had planned for that. We talked about transferring to different classes and how we would put them on a staggered start. That was a staggered passing, I'm sorry, between 10 to 15 minutes, where students are staggered, released one class at a time, so that there's not a large number of students ever in our hallways at one time. Same thing for bus drop off and pickup, and they liked all of that. We were able to ask all our questions and run through different scenarios, different what ifs, different possibilities, and how we would handle that, and got some really good advisement from them on all of those things. But so I just wanted to let you know, we spent 3 hours with them. We got to get all of our questions asked, and now we're back in planning phases. We went back to our staff because we, after meeting with them, had to rethink and change some things. So we've been going back to our staff and asking their opinion and input on that, and that's where we're at right now. We at the high school are ready to make a decision on a schedule and what that's going to look like. We've asked for a lot of input from our staff, and now Chuck and I just need to reflect on it over the weekend, and we're going to make a decision on Monday with what the final schedule will be like. What questions do you have about our visit with the health department or anything I've shared?
Ruby, I'm curious, if we have an outbreak in one of our schools, does that shut down the entire district?
No, it doesn't, not necessarily, unless we're in a community-wide outbreak situation. But if there's a positive case in one of our buildings, for example, we wouldn't need to shut that down. We ask those questions. We ask that question about, what about secondary transfer? If I am a high school student and my 4th grade sibling, their cohort got shut down because someone in his class tested positive, he would be staying home and quarantining, but me as a secondary sibling would not have to. I would still be going to school unless people in my household started showing signs and symptoms. Then I'm quarantining too with my household. So we asked a lot about those situations.
Yeah, with our classified employees, like one of the lunch providers, what if they got it? How would that work?
Yeah.
Like, so you got it. What would happen?
Yeah, we are going to be asking, and the health department really stressed this, to really have these conversations and be really strong on your expectations. By having everybody screen at home, our staff and our families screening at home, we're really trying to prevent them from ever bringing it into the buildings. If you're showing, and if you go through that questionnaire and take your temperature and you can answer yes to any of them, then we are asking you to stay home for 14 days. If we have an employee that shows any signs and symptoms, it is so important that they stay home for 14 days and not come to work, because that plays a huge role in ever preventing the virus from entering our buildings. We can't be sure, of course, that that's not ever going to happen, because people want to be at school. So,
yeah,
you know.
That leads me to my very next question. Staffing. We get staff that are sick, and we're low on staffing with no substitute pool.
Yeah. You might have heard from Sheldon and seen that we posted a long-term substitute positions. We're looking to get some long-term substitutes so that we know that's going to happen, because staff members are going to be really cautious. And so they're going to have a little headache and they're not going to come in, or they might feel just a little bit congested. They're not going to come in. And so we're hoping to have extra bodies on staff. We also know that as counselors, as principals, we are going to be covering classrooms for teachers that can't report in. And so it's going to be all hands on deck. And if we get into a situation where we can't have the classroom covered, the worst case scenario would be to just have those students stay home and not come in for in-person learning. One of the strategies we have at the high school is we have the library and the room next to the library, which we call the room of requirement, and all buildings, not just us, are making a plan for this. We are setting that up with plexiglass barriers to have individual workstations spread out throughout that, so that we could have students do online learning in there. So For example, teachers have asked a lot about this. What if I have a child that's in a cohort in 2nd grade that gets quarantined? I need to now stay home and care for my child. He can't be home alone. Can that be an option for me? Absolutely, that can be an option for you. And with an environment like that, we could have those students in the library, supervised by our librarian, actually online with their teacher who's not sick, but at home for other reasons, or has to stay home for 14 days, and they're actually learning online with their teacher while they're at school waiting for their next class. So those are just, it's like one example of the probably 50 different scenarios we walked through with them, but they did talk about plexiglass barriers are good. That's an option. That's a great option if you can spread those out and put up those plexiglass barriers that students can do their online class there. Because at the high school, we're going to have situations where somebody has an in-person class 1st period, an online class 2nd period, and an in-person class 3rd period, and they don't have a car, they don't drive home. They're going to have to take that online class somewhere in our building. So we need to make that happen. They did mention that with plexiglass barriers, have a really tight and strong cleaning schedule. As those aerosols gather in that one space where they collect and accumulate, and so we really have to make sure that we have a great cleaning schedule in those places. What other questions do you have?
I think it's a testimony to me not having questions as to what a great job you guys have done in running through different scenarios and having a plan that provides as many options and flexibility as it does. I'm not thinking of anything up off the top of my head that I haven't heard you guys address already.
Yeah, I'm really thankful for all your hard work. I really appreciate it. And one thing that's been coming up for me that I'm not sure who to address it to, as this has been anecdotal, but as I've talked to people, like a lot of parents are really unsure still what they're going to do in the fall. Like, and I haven't filled out my elementary survey yet.
Sure.
So I'm guilty too. And also I've talked to people who are talking about like homeschooling or some option like that, just because that's what they feel more comfortable with. And I just wonder what I guess one of my concerns is maybe we get to the fall and a bunch of people don't do either of our options, because I feel like we need more of a message that we want students back, both because we want them back and that we can be flexible. And also, if a bunch of people decide to homeschool, that could be a hit for us financially, because people aren't sure. And like the survey for the elementary school said, do you want like the Florida virtual remote, or do you want in person or no school? I just think it's hard with people are uncertain right now.
I think that's a
Yeah.
good point, and we need to probably figure out our communication. We still have options, which is our homeschool support program, which people could get help there. And we've even talked about what does that curriculum look like, that we can do that. I mean, they probably wouldn't come in on the Thursday like they do now. We would do that remotely with teachers, and we're hiring teachers to do that. I think, and so, yeah, that survey was sent out a little early, than we've even come up with now. So we probably, especially if we can make a decision and a timeline on the decision of where we're headed in the next 10 days, we can communicate that out better. Because I do see that as probably we didn't know, but right now probably making sure that every option is out there and we're clearly communicating that and giving people to talk. Always encourage people to call us and work with us. I talked to 3 parents last night, and it wasn't like, oh, I want to do this or want that, or you're doing bad or whatever. It's just like, I just don't know. I have this and this and this. And it was a 20-minute conversation, all very good conversation. And they're from out of state and moving here. And so it is tough. I mean, they had some circumstances with their own kids and grandparents to take care of, and all kinds of, everybody has their story, right? And that's that balancing act of those 3 things. Is none of those will work for every individual. Every individual is different, and we want to be as flexible and open to that as possible. And so please have them reach out to our staff and talk through it. And I know Ruby's had this experience, and Chuck has, as people have called and we've talked through it, and they're in a really good spot. And so we want to make sure that that's open. And as we get closer, hopefully they'll have those conversations. I hope the worst thing you want is people to make judgments and choices without speaking with us and understanding what we do have to offer. And that's what you're saying is let's really get out there of what we are offering and opportunities to have those conversations.
Yeah, and I think some outreach would be good because I think there's some that are calling you, but there's some that aren't. And I feel like you guys are working your butts off. I'm super thankful.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to be for naught just because people didn't know or just made decisions without knowing what's available.
Right. Yep, that's a good point. And we'll try to figure out how to best do that without causing more conflict. So yeah.
Good luck.
I have a question about staff and sort of what kind of feedback you guys have been getting from the staff. There were, scary numbers that came out from CEA about, nearly 80% of staff saying that they would be willing to refuse coming back. I guess, what have you heard from our staff locally? Are they in that group? Are they feeling a little bit more comfortable based on all of the planning that has been going on and all the safety precautions that we're getting in place?
I can speak. Oh, go ahead, Sheldon.
I'll start, and then Ruby will have a lot more detailed information, I think. First off is, yes, we have concerns all the way through. There's a lot of HR things of what if I do get sick, how do sick leave days, all those things. And we've been trying to sort that. That's new for us too. We're trying to sort that out with our insurance companies and state law and all those sort of things, and trying to give information. We gave some information out last week on those. Those are a lot of the questions I've got at my level. Of course, there was some questions on whether we're going to require masks or not. And earlier in the year, I think that was a question that would have caused a lot of conflict, but now I don't think it would. And so we did make that call. We would wear masks. We are reconsidering K1, honestly, because there's kids touching their face and playing with their masks and doing whatever kids do at that age in their masks. May not be as safe as some plexiglass things and also the spread of disease in that age group. But so there's been that sort of questions. We do have some teachers that are vulnerable. And we went through that process with them, and we have some teachers that are doing the online teaching have already been identified because of vulnerable situations. I'm sure we'll have a little more of that. We have some teachers that think, is this worth it to me? Should I retire or not? We have some of those things. And also, in June, I didn't want to send out stuff and get people fired up about stuff I didn't know. I had different decision making in June than I do now. And it didn't make any sense to fight over stuff that aren't decisions. And so I think there was some concern about communication going out. If you really look at the CEA, a lot of their concern, and rightfully so, and I think that's important, is that they want to have say, they want to have conversations, they want to have their first three things was that. Their fourth thing was that they wanted to follow the state guidelines, and we are following state guidelines, even going further in our county. There are many counties in the state that are saying we're not following the guidelines. And so that's what their concern was there. Our county is very good about following the guidelines, even go a little bit further, and we're going further than that. So I don't think that's a concern, but like say some counties have said, we're not following the orders put out by the governor. So there are teachers in those counties that are very, very concerned, and rightly so. So I guess my next stage, and Ruby can probably talk to this, is right now, and we're in the process of this, and this is, again, a plan, not a decision. Although I think it is a good plan. I think it would make a good decision because of the importance of the equity and in-person under the conditions we are now. And hopefully the conditions get better. Hopefully we're just seeing the 4th of July surge. But if conditions change, of course we have to adjust. But having those conversations, and we're just starting those conversations, we're starting to have those and have input on what choices, what would be best, hear their concerns, try to follow up with their concerns. That is where we've been. But and also finding support. We've asked for health aides. We're doing subs. We're replacing the teachers to not add extra burden onto our teachers that are already here. That's not easy. We're not really having overwhelming applications for those. But, and also, I sent out even in the fall is that your job description may change. You may not be teaching. If we can't have your class, you may be helping somewhere else. You may be moved somewhere else. We may use you to split out kids. You may be supervising lunch, all those sort of things. And they've been very receptive. We have a great staff. They want to do what's best for kids. But of course, all of us are concerned every time we walk in a store and every time we walk in a school, every time you do those things. So we've got to do the best possible thing for our students and our staff to keep them safe. And I'll let Ruby talk a little about some of the conversations I've been really encouraging the principals have with their own people in their own buildings, because that where the decisions have to be made for them, not for me, to different in the middle school and the high school and the elementary. So.
I don't know that I have any more to add, Sheldon. You did a great job given a district-wide perspective. We surveyed closely our teachers at the high school, and they are really wanting to provide in-person access to kids who need it. And it's just about, we have to do it safely. We have to make sure, staff is our #1 most vulnerable population. And we really are looking at plans for reopening that with a #1 priority of limiting the number of bodies that our staff members come in contact with. And so we are being creative, and it's going to be a drastic change to our schedule at the high school. It's going to be quite different because of that, but it's what we have to do, because health and safety is our #1 priority. So.
I have a question. In the next 2 weeks, we're going to have a much better idea about the outbreaks and the numbers. If we chose to wait to open our doors, our physical doors, until October, what would that look like? I know a lot of schools have made that decision just recently. What would that look like for us if we chose to open in October? And when would we make that decision?
Well, this is kind of complicated, but I don't think anyone has said October yet. A lot of them have put off a week or a few days to train their teachers up, a possibility, do some things in their classroom. There's also another reason why they're probably doing that, honestly, and that is financially. They're able to use COVID funds to pay for that week for their teachers and use all their COVID funds. That will save them money. And so I think that is probably directing that more than anything else, because I don't think that we will know any more information on the 7th, unless we have an outbreak, which we'll have to adjust to anyway, on the 17th of August versus the 24th of August or whatever. Now, moving a whole month, if we have an outbreak and saying, hey, we just don't feel comfortable going out in school because there's chance of community spread or multiple outbreaks, I would say, having a 4-week out to start would be, could be possible. I think anything has to be possible. So if we decided to either do a week or 2 weeks, I'm not taking that off the table. That's just my thought off the top of my head. To count the kids as students and to get paid for them and move the instructional time, we'd have to move to online courses. We really, I guess my opinion, and talking to a few of the principals, maybe not all of them, is we feel that it's the most important thing in getting online learning going is have that connection with your teachers as soon as possible. And so to make that connection and make that, and the kid know their teacher at least for a little bit. So our goal would be get them in there as long as it's safe. And again, depending on the outbreak and what the thing is get them in there as long as we possibly could. So we build those relationships in case we do have to go out. Like I said, I think some of them, of course, if you had 16,000 employees and to train them and communicate with them and not have the one-on-one meetings that all my principals are having, I understand why they may need some time. I also think that it is financial, which we did it in a different way to use those funds. And it was able to do it. So I think there's many factors in that. But and I'd say we wouldn't do it as of right now, but if we needed to because of health reasons, we would go to cloud school. We'd figure out a way, like we did one day in March, getting the material out, getting things started, work with our teachers to build relationships the first week and do those sort of things if that was the case. There's probably another reason why some of those schools are pushing back a little bit too. It's not just financial, is because of air conditioning and movement of air. And a lot of them also started the 17th of August, where we're starting the 24th. And we're actually having a roll-in start, so it'll be a little slower, bringing in smaller groups and getting them oriented and that kind of stuff, is what our proposal is going to be, I believe. We're still working that out. So I guess that's a really long answer to that. But I think our goal right now is that as long as it's safe, as long as we feel comfortable, is that a week would not really help us. And we don't need it to get things rolling, and we want to make sure that we build those relationships as soon as possible to be successful later on. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ruby.
No, right on. I would just add that keep in mind remembering how incredibly fortunate we are in our community. We already had such a small teacher to student. Our teacher to student ratio was 15:1. And by putting interventionists back in the classroom, we have been able to get our classroom sizes down so small. Larger districts can't do that. And so a part of their reasoning too is they don't have the resources we have in our local community. I feel so grateful and fortunate. And I empathize with those larger districts and those administrators that can't do what we're doing. That they just don't have the means to do it, but we do. And so I feel really lucky about that. And the only other thing that I might add is we are in the mountains. And so some of the air circulation problems that other districts are having, we're not having because we have such great weather in the summer, which is why everyone wants to come to Estes Park in August.
I do have a quick question about mask enforcement, especially for the older grades. I know with the little ones, kids love rules. I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue with the little ones, but for middle school and high school, mask enforcement is going to be a challenge for teachers and staff. And if a kid refuses to wear a mask, will there be disciplinary actions on that? How will that be dealt with?
I think, we're restorative justice or practice school. And first thing is that, giving students availabilities to have non-mask time. Also, like Ruby said, is really emphasize the importance of this. You're putting your teacher at risk, and that means that we might not have this school next week if we have those things. And really having those one-on-one conversations and working with that and going with that as much as possible. I think if they refuse, find out why, what the thing is, so important, show them why. I mean, students are pretty good. Adults are maybe behind that, may not be as good. And then we'll have some students that for health reasons won't be wearing masks, and that's really difficult because what do we do with that, right? Because why do I have to wear a mask if they don't have to? And we can't really tell why because it's a health situation. I mean, those are challenges. But we have students challenge us in all of our rules, in all of our situations, and we have a very small percentage, 2 or 3% that we have to move to extended circumstances or those sort of things. And when you talk about discipline, I mean, I suppose that, if we could not mitigate in any other way, one of the top mitigations would be, well, then you are in this cubicle learning with online and you can't be around the other students because you won't wear a mask, because we still want to have much education as possible. And of course, if people continue to escalate and get out of control, I mean, we have to go through whatever other things that we have to do with that. But that would be our plan. And, we have great kids. We have good things going on. And if we take the time to really explain the why and make it reasonable, I think, is give them some time. And that's why it's great that we're able to do the 15 kids in a classroom. It gives us a little more flexibility in that sense. That most kids will comply like they comply to all of our other rules, and then we'll have to work very diligently and respectful with the others.
So will it be also kind of treated like a dress code rule?
Yeah, I mean, it would be dress code, cell phone, whatever. I mean, people put this in different places in their policies and expectations. But yeah, I mean, it could be dealt with in a lot of places. It could be dealt with in the health health code. It could be done in dress code. It could be done in insubordination, all those areas. And it could escalate into all those different things. And we'll have the wording in there. I have 25 policies for you guys to review next time. I was trying to have that today for this meeting, but it's kind of extensive, and I have a webinar on Monday to learn more about it. But definitely, we'll have the support of our administration and our teachers behind it. And but again, as we know, when you give people yes or no choices and fight with people, it does not work as well as using restorative practices and tell the why behind it and work through the process to get to that very small percentage of defiance. And will these protocols and expectations be communicated well to the parents and the guardians? We'll try, yes. We'll definitely with that. And as we come up with, after we see the rules and everything else, we'll have to say, what that is. And we anticipate some, and I have some already that I'm working through. But again, anytime you have something like this, Ruby reminds me we have the same issue with whatever rule we come up with. We just have, like you say, communicate it, have the expectation clear, have the procedures clear, work through a restorative practice process, and then deal with whatever happens after that, like we would any rule. Excellent. All right, thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments about the fall start options? Or about the Florida virtual school? Nope. All right, Sheldon, let's move on to 2.3, the calendar and the PD days. As you can see, life for our teachers and our principals and everyone, and yourselves, I suppose, everybody has changed. And so one of the things that with all the work we're doing with our schools and changing and putting people in cohorts is that we've lost some of our PLC time in the middle and high school especially, and probably in all schools. And so we're looking at ways that we could possibly help with that. Have your teachers have time together and even a little time to maybe take a breath and redo some things. So my suggestion that came from our principals and probably from the teachers was that we use our elementary days, PD days, which are 4 of them that are only elementary, and increase that to all schools. It will also help with our high schoolers being home, take care of kids and so on. So there'd be 4 days, I think, that was sent out there that would be all staff PD days that were only elementary in the past. It also allow us to do some deep cleaning in all those days because the buildings would be closed, and it would give us some chances to catch up and deep clean in all of our buildings. So I would increase the PD days for the middle and high school to replicate the PD days of the elementary, and that would include 4 days for that. We'd still be fine in instructional time. We would still be fine with the days in school. All those sort of things we would meet the criteria for that for instructional time that we'd not have to worry about.
I think it's great. I think they've been well used at the elementary school, and I think the other schools would benefit from them. So I'm in favor of it. And I know my middle school daughter is very in favor of it.
All right, Danielle, would you like to make a comment on that?
I just want to confirm that the calendar that's in the board packet there is the modified one. I'm looking at this correctly.
Yes.
Okay.
And that'll be the one that we're voting on, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Heather.
And I will also say, that like Laura brought up earlier, I mean, I could come with you with another calendar change in the future, depending on circumstances or if we see an absolute need. So, but this one I feel very confident that we'll do no matter what. So I brought it early. So. Yeah, the next 2 weeks are going to be very interesting. All right. Any other questions about the calendar? No. All right. Moving on to discussion item 2. I think that we probably would need to vote on that one. Yeah, we do that on the action items. Oh, it's action later. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't have the thing in front of me. Okay. That's all right. All right. Moving on to 2.4, the activities and the athletics, Sheldon. Okay. Yeah, I talked to Chuck yesterday, and we thought yesterday we were going to get some information from CHASA. We did not. It might be in there this morning. I've not seen anything. They're trying to come up with a plan and what that looks like. Again, we do not have to follow that plan. I mean, it is still a board's choice on what to do on there. And I think that there's a lot of factors going on in that. I think that they're trying to separate what sports may be safer than other sports, and they're looking at moving all the sports to the spring. There's a lot of different things in that. That will be a choice that you have. The information I have right now is that we don't know what that will look like. Marching band has been canceled for the year. I would suspect, I don't know how they would run, especially our contact sports. I would have a hard time believing that they would be able to go there that right now. But if they do go with that, then we would have to look at that and make that choice. And that'll probably come up fairly quick too. They are supposed to start fall sports. I think golf starts August 3rd, and then the other sports could start practicing August 10th. So we expect that at any date. I think we can make that decision before we get that, I suppose. But I think that it would be better informed decision and a better understanding decision once we've seen what the plan was before we made that decision.
I have a question about football because it is a contact sport, and we've received a little bit of concern from our community about the football practice and football season. Are most districts, especially our neighboring districts, waiting on CHASA's new rules on football?
Yeah, everybody is waiting, and their rule might be not, they don't have it. I mean, they're not just setting up procedure rules. They're trying to decide what they can have and not have, what they could push to spring, what could they do. All that is on the table, and it is a huge amount of work that's been going on. So they will give that guidance, and it might just be a moot point. It may not exist anyway, so that's why I don't want to make a decision on something that's a moot point. Or if they do, then we would have to decide what the risk factors are with that, and the transportation concerns and staffing concerns and everything with that. So again, I think that those are all very good questions. I think that they are important. I hope that people are making the right rules, and once we see the rules, then we can make our own choice.
Okay, but it's worth waiting to hear from CHASA before we make any decision.
I think so. No school has made that decision whatsoever, and all plans right now say activities and athletics are still waiting on that. And I understand. I mean, how emotional that is and how big a deal it is for the state. And they're also not going to. They're going to try everything they can to the last minute to see if something changes to help out their students, like everyone else. But they are going to have to make what their plan is, and with that, and they do understand the risks that are being in place, and they have all the information and concerns that you guys have coming to them 1,000-fold. So and they're working with the state and the health departments as well. So again, we will see what they come up with, and again, we can make our choice as well as every other school.
Yeah, and for the other board members, you might hear this in the community too. Maybe you will, or maybe you won't. I have the concern about the football team already starting their conditioning, and why we have allowed that to happen. Sheldon, can you talk to about that for a minute?
Well, in June, the health department opened up for conditioning, no contact. We do screenings. Right now, I think they're about the mass. In July, at some point, they allowed students to go indoors and like practice basketball if there's only like 3 in the building and wore masks. We have been following these rules very, very strictly. They're not practicing football. They're running with their helmets on. They are no contact. There's nothing like that. It's no different than the cross-country team for the most part. And that is to give our kids the athletic outlet and the conditioning if we do have sports, and also just that camaraderie and so on under safe conditions. We do not let any kid inside. We do not use locker rooms. They have to come prepared, leave that way. And so it's under very strict guidance from the health department, and we followed it, again, even more extreme than the health department at this time. So again, they're not practicing football, they are running, like cross country is running, and those sort of things, and that is in place. That has anything to do with CHASA. They're not in control of that. That was what schools was able to do as part of the opening, as part of graduation ceremonies and all those things, as long as we followed the strict guidelines that we are following.
I don't know if I understood you correctly. Our football team is conditioning right now, but not tackling. There's no contact. It's more running and like physical conditioning rather than touching each other.
Right. I mean, they don't have pads. There's no pads on. They might be wearing their helmets because that's sort of something you do to condition in, because they're heavy and people have to get used to their helmets. I don't know if they are or not. That is a typical conditioning thing. But they cannot have contact. They do not have any uniforms to do that. No shoulder pads, nothing.
Okay, so it is kind of like the cross country where they're exercising.
They're probably running drills, passing the ball, but they couldn't pass the ball. They couldn't share the ball for a long time. But some of the conditions, if they cleaned it and kept in the cohorts, they could do that. And that just happened a few weeks ago. But before that, they couldn't even have a ball out there. So it's all under the rules that they have. So.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Sheldon about the activities in the athletics? All right, Sheldon, moving on to 2.5, our upcoming policy changes.
As I said, there is multiple COVID changes, and I'm trying to get my head around those. There's a lot of them some of them have to do with attendance, how we count attendance, how we count instructional time, and what we count as the educational process. The educational process is that, what does it look like on our online schools? What do they have to do? Do they have to log in so much time, or do they have to meet criteria? What does that look like? It's because we have to define that educational process, which is really broad right now because of COVID, and have the accountability so that we can count kids. CASB just sent out those recommendations, I think last Friday, and then they have a webinar this Monday on it, and I want to know a little more about those. And then, of course, a lot of those cross over into a lot of different other policies. Like you said, with masks, where does that go? Does it go into dress code? All those sort of things. And they have recommendations for those. Like I say, a lot of them are mentioned in a lot of different situations. Now, as far as the education and instructional time, there's two ways we can go. We can go try to adjust our policies or do a resolution for this year. For those specific ones, I would say resolution. Then we don't have to go back next year and redo all of our policies for a one-year deal. And that is totally acceptable, and it meets the needs that we have. So there's a couple that I will recommend as resolutions versus policy. It has the same effect as policy, but they go away at the end of the year, and we don't have to go back and redo all the policies and revote on them at a later date because we changed them specifically for COVID, because they would no longer meet the new criteria if we go back to pre-COVID days. The other large thing is that the federal government with the Department of Education has completely revised all the Title IX laws. And Title IX, of course, deals with discrimination based on race, sex, gender, all those sort of things. So it is very, very comprehensive. It's many policies. It is embedded through a lot of our policies. There hasn't been a lot of guidance, and we just barely got those policies as well, and there has to be training involved. Usually, we have Title IX coordinators in the building. I'm taking that on because our buildings are so busy. And so I'm reaching through all those and figuring out the training, the policies of that. The policies are required, and they are pretty clear cut. So you will just have to basically adopt those. Not a lot of choice on them, and they're pretty well written of what they are. And then from those, I'll have to figure out all the training and processes that I have to do with that, which is most of the work in those things. But they have to be done by August 14th, even though we just got them last week. So that'll have to be part of our process, and it has to be 2 readings, so probably have to have a meeting sometime in August, early, and then our August 24th, or we'll probably have to adopt them earlier than that. So I'll see that process. No school has adopted them yet, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that, and I'll keep you informed. And then there's some HR things that we have to change as well. As you know, COVID changes, like on sick leave and those sort of things, that if a person has COVID, they wouldn't use our sick bank, they use a different thing, they would pay with COVID dollars. And so we are also getting our HR groups, we're trying to get our lawyers all together, our attorneys next week, to get some wording on some of that stuff as well, to try to finalize that as well. So, not necessarily controversial type things, just a lot.
So you're saying that we should probably schedule a special meeting to discuss and adopt the new CASB policies?
I
First,
think so. And I'm sorry, I was hoping to do it this week, but it just wasn't going to work. So.
yeah, I think that we all figured we'd have extra meetings in August just for all the huge changes. Okay, so you'll let us know when you have that information and when the best time to have that meeting
Yeah,
to.
I mean, we could pick a day if it's possible for you guys. Either that first week of August or before the 14th would be my requirement for Title IX.
Okay.
And some of them have to be done before school starts as far as instructional time and how we're going to do that, which would be the 24th. So,
we can discuss that a little bit later in the meeting when we talk about upcoming meetings and designations. We can look at people's schedules.
Any questions on any of that?
No, thank you. It's a lot of information. I read through all of it that you guys gave us yesterday. It's a lot of changes.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, and interpreting those is the hard part. So that's why I want to do the webinar first on Monday. So.
Excellent. Yeah, I was going to bring that up too. Just a reminder that maybe as many of us as possible should join that webinar. All right. Any other questions for Sheldon about the upcoming policy changes? Daniel? Oh, sorry. I saw your mute was off. So moving on to agenda item 3, action items, the approval of the calendar changes. Would a board member like to make a motion to approve the calendar changes?
So moved.
I'll second.
Heather, roll call, please.
Mr. Adams,
Aye.
Mrs. Capo, Mrs. Case,
Aye.
Mr. Kushner,
Aye.
Mrs. Wolf.
Aye.
The ayes have the vote and the motion is passed. Moving on to agenda item 4, upcoming meetings and designations. Our next work session will be August 11th at 2 o'clock. That one, I know that we talked about this when I was in the office the other day about Zoom or not Zoom. Heather, what do you think by that time will we be able to meet in the administration room or meeting room, or it's we've been looking at the safety of having in-person meetings, not just for our board members, but for people who want to join the meeting. If we have 50 people that want to join our meeting, then we'll have to find a bigger venue. It gets very complicated. Or if we have our meeting and then can Zoom it for participants to participate through Zoom. Heather, can you speak on that for just a minute?
Yeah, I think probably our best bet is going to be to meet in person, and we can use the admin conference room, and then we'll, based on anybody who wants to publicly comment, we could set up Zoom so that they can join online. That way we're not, going over any set capacity that might happen as we see the next 2 weeks kind of unfold with maybe how restrictions or, the variants, if anything gets rolled back, we could be back down to 10. So we just want to make sure that we're careful with that. And so I think the best way is that, certainly the 7 of us could be in the room and be equally spaced and wearing masks, and then we can do Zoom for the public.
I think that would be the safest option. That is something that has been brought up in our community about our board not meeting in person yet. Something I've been thinking about with that is that nobody has really met in person yet. So when teachers start meeting in person, and with our next meeting, we'll meet in person. So it's really Not that controversial of a thing. We're just
My biggest
still.
tension is just sound quality, and that's something that I can play with a little bit, only because when we are in a room together, we're all wearing masks, so sometimes voices are muffled, or so we just want to make sure that whatever I have set up for technology can amplify our voices or the conversations heard, because we don't want to disservice the public by doing that and then they can't hear us.
And
Yeah, I know Sarah has had some meetings at Eagle Rock where they wear face masks, and she says it's really hard to hear people.
Yeah.
And so she's found it frustrating. I mean, I also, it sounds like there's a leaning towards meeting in person. Is an outside venue okay?
Yes,
You
I
mean-
know some people have done outside venues. I mean, the wind and the sound is probably the thing, but yes, I mean, that is an option. We'll look at options and come up with some things and
Okay.
work with that, and you know, also understanding that safety's first, and if we don't meet in person, that's okay too. I think it's good optics, but also on the other hand is if we're trying to eliminate everything that we possibly can, what is the advantage and not advantage of meeting, right? Is there a value of being together or not being a value? I've kind of changed my philosophy on that a little bit, is that if we're trying to reduce everything we possibly can, maybe it isn't as bad as I think, but we probably ought to have one in to see if we can do it.
And
Okay.
the town hall is not even open yet for meetings, so we have to be flexible with their schedule as well.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Also, I know Sheldon was saying that we're going to have all those measures to pass, and we need a meeting in August. I think we've talked about before, is it possible to tack on a regular meeting to our work session so we can, I mean, we're meeting then anyway, so.
Yeah, so that's what I would suggest, is we have a special meeting before the work session. You can actually either combine it all together or actually have two meetings. A lot of people have that standard. They always have a business meeting before their work session, just in case they have to do something. So yeah, that is totally acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah,
What about the
great idea.
Sorry, what about with the 2 readings for the policies? Do they have to be separated by a certain amount of time? I can't remember what the.
I'm going to check into that, and I'm not sure with our timelines. I mean, in the spring, they had a waiver for that, and you didn't have to have 2 readings. That's one thing I'm going to check on for that, and so hopefully that's the case.
It's still
And so I will check on that. But that's a good point.
I think in our policy we passed the ability to be able to do a 1 reading and approval.
Yeah,
So
there's conditions on it, but I think that is correct under emergency situation, which we're still under. But I was going to double check. I'm pretty confident about the COVID stuff we can do. The Title IX is a federal thing that I need a little more information on.
yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. Also, in-person meetings, whoever is speaking can take their mask off, correct?
Yes, with 6-foot distancing, yes.
Okay, so I'm a reader, so that'll be good for me. Okay, so would we like to add on that special meeting onto our work session to discuss and to vote on the CASB policy changes? Does that work for all of our members?
If possible, yeah, because I know Sheldon's got to check on whether it's okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Thank you for bringing that up, Jason. All right. Another thing that I wanted to ask everybody, we wanted to discuss and adopt our board goals and Sheldon's goals, and we were going to do that in a work session in August. We can add that to the work session in August, or we can push that to September if you'd like. I don't know if you all want to really focus on the COVID and the opening and kind of wait just a little bit on our goals and his goals. I talked to Sheldon about that, and he's fine with doing that now or waiting. I wanted to check in with you. I would like to really focus on opening and COVID, but I'm absolutely open to discussing our goals as well.
Why don't we wait and see what the agenda is looking like? If it's a big agenda of COVID and opening stuff, then let's focus on that. And if there's space.
What does our agenda look like so far for the work session in August?
Well, I think you know, and this may be another reason why we may need a special meeting or whatever, is again, I have this, I have a plan. We will have the CHASA stuff. There will be stuff on there that you may need to make decisions on. I want you guys, how involved you want to be on those decisions. If it's total board or my decision or whatever, I would like the board to make those decisions on what our school looks like and possibly on the CHASA stuff, depending on what they come up with. So, I don't know if we can wait till 11th to do that. Maybe we need to wait till the 11th to do that, depending on the situation and businesses and spread and everything else. I don't know, but I would like the board to discuss and either vote on it or give me direction on those two things.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wasn't quite clear on what people want to do when it comes to the board goals. Would you like to leave that for August or push that to September?
I think Jason's point, let's see how full the schedule is for the 11th, but I would be okay if we have a full schedule. I think it's fine to push it to September. If we wind up having a second meeting before the 11th, or I guess the first meeting, then there might be room on the 11th. So we can kind of let it float for now. I know it's not really a decision, but.
That's all right. All right. Yeah, we'll play that as it goes. Thank you for your.
Yep.
Oh, Eric, I haven't heard back from you.
Makes sense. I agree with Danielle.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other comments about our
My only thing would be maybe because you're together right now and could have a discussion, it's a little easier, is maybe pick a tentative date in that first week of August in case we have to have two, just so you guys kind of have a heads up on what could be possible.
I think that's
we wouldn't necessarily have a meeting, but it would help. I know you plan to do that.
All right. And you said in the first or second week of August?
Well, the second week is kind of the 11th anyway, so I think I just looked at that. No, calendar from me now.
Sheldon, do you have a preference during that first week?
No, I'll make it happen. Yeah. No,
I'll be camping that week, so I will not be there.
Okay. I think Monday, Wednesday, Friday are bad for Christy. So if we could pick either Tuesday or Thursday, that would help us as we try and get our numbers.
Either of those should work for me.
And would we like, or could we schedule one for the week after to where Jason can join us?
That's the 11th.
Right.
well, Tuesday is the 11th of the next week, so.
And I'll be there.
Any of those times work for me. Heather, if you want to, I'm super open. Heather, you want to?
Something on Tuesday the 4th?
Sure.
Yeah, on Tuesday the 4th, I do have that new committee I've done on school safety. I have my first advisory meeting at 1:30, but other than that, I can work around.
Okay, so maybe Tuesday morning?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock?
Sure.
All right.
And so I would want to make, granted, I know this is a tentative set, but I would want to make sure that I have the ability for us to meet in person for that.
Okay.
Correct?
On that one, because it's special meeting and first reading, let's try to do that one Zoom and really focus in on trying to do it well on the 11th.
Okay.
That'll be my suggestion.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't tell people things.
I agree.
That is me.
Yeah, as of now, as many Zoom meetings as we can do, that's what I'm most comfortable with, but I know that's going to change.
And as a note, just for the board to know, I am off grid from this Sunday through August 2nd.
Yay.
Yay. Much needed.
All right. So Heather, you're going to send that out to all of us. Awesome. Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item 5, other. I'd like to start with, as Sheldon mentioned before, CASB is holding a webinar to explain the new special policies and updates on the district reopening on Monday, July 27th at 3 o'clock. Heather sent us all of the registration. Their webinars usually last about 40 minutes to an hour. They're very informative. Casby does a great job with those. I encourage as many of us that can to listen in on that conversation. And you can
also, they record them and get them out very quickly. So if you can't make it, then you can still access it too.
Yeah, if you do join it live, you don't have to show your face. You can kind of do what Heather's doing.
To get,
Yeah, I've done recordings a couple times. Those are great.
I was going to register to get the recording really quick, because then they'll email it to you because you are registered, and then you don't have to find it on their website.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. Okay, yeah, so you don't have to be there at the time. But anyway, anybody have any other comments before we sign off?
Huge thanks to Sheldon and the district staff for all the work they've been putting in this summer. It's supposed to be a downtime for them, and it sounds like it's just been insane. So I'm really thankful for all the hard work you all put into dealing with this craziness.
Thank you. And I think a double shout out needs to go out to the administrators. I mean, they've just been amazing. So it's been tough, and hopefully we're not too burnt out when school starts, but we've done some really nice work with the information we've had. So I'm proud of that.
I wanted to also mention at our work session, we might have community comments that would like to be read or said. We're going to get more feedback by our work session, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our community. And Sheldon, with that, would they speak for themselves if they join the meeting, or would we read their letters and statements? How's the best way to do that?
I mean, you know, we want as much transparency and as much participation we can. I mean, I think both would be acceptable. I think we'd give an option. I mean, I want to hear from people and hear their concerns. So I would say we try to have them speak and give them the 3-minute thing. I mean, I think people are more familiar right now with, and we are more familiar now with Zoom and those sort of things. So it's possible. And just give that choice. The main thing is that we want them to be heard. And if they want us to read it, I think it's important that we read it. So, or if they want to say it, it's important that they're able to say it, as long as we can facilitate that. And I've been in enough meetings now with 200 people. I think we can. So.
Yeah, and normally people don't speak at our work sessions because they don't come to them. But I think with this one's important before our regular meeting to hear the voices of our community and the concerns that they have.
Yeah, you could do it either way. We could start with the regular meeting and have them just voice there as we normally would, or we could do it in the work session. Either one is fine.
We'll probably do it in both.
Yeah,
probably have comments in both.
So we want to hear from people. I mean, the worst thing we can have is not listening to all voices. So
right.
Definitely. All right. Moving on to agenda item 6, adjournment. Would a board member like to make a motion to adjourn this special meeting?
So before we do that, we did have one letter come in. And I think they would like it read out loud.
Is that the one from David?
Yeah.
For this meeting, or would you like to do that with the next meeting, Danielle?
I think the intention was to do it now per the email that he sent.
Okay.
That's fine, as long as you guys choose to read it. That's fine. Any correspondence, you're able to read at any time. So.
Okay.
Just don't have to. You can.
All right, Danielle, would you like to read that letter?
Eric, I believe you made arrangements.
I was going to. I'm on my cell phone because my iPad ran out of battery, so I'm not sure that I can get to it without changing up the orientation of my phone. If everybody's okay with that.
Yeah.
I can read it.
Okay. We just want to make sure that it is from David Wolf versus his position as the fire chief. We want to make that very clear that it was him as an individual, not speaking on behalf of the fire department.
Okay, great. So should I read the letter?
Yes.
Okay. Superintendent Rosenkrantz and Estes Park School Board. I am writing to voice my concerns for the plan to reopen school to in-person instruction in August. We continue to see increases in cases across Larimer County and the state of Colorado correlating with the loosening of restrictions. We will find out in the next week if Larimer County will maintain or lose our variants to the safe at home orders, or if we can continue in safer at home. The governor and CDPHE have been promoting targets to reduce social interaction 65% or more to keep from overwhelming our emergency departments and medical system. Given what we are seeing over the last couple weeks, I don't see how we can expect bringing our students and teachers back into a group setting is a good idea. I care very deeply about education and understand the value that in-person instruction adds for students. I understand the important role our schools play in providing not only education, but childcare, meal service, mental health services, and so many other services our community needs. I want my children to be able to return to school and to daycare. I want to have our restaurants fully open, our hotels full of guests, and our parks and open spaces available to those who want to visit. I don't want to wear a mask every time I leave my house. Unfortunately, what I want to happen and reality are in conflict. So I have to accept our reality. We have to accept that no matter how much we want things to be better, we aren't there yet. Making the decision to delay the start of in-person instruction will be a hard one because so many of us will want to believe the nightmare is over. We could hope that the county or state will make the decision for us, but hope isn't a strategy. We need leadership to stand up for what is right, not just their online, just what we want to hear. Making a decision earlier will enable teachers to focus on development of their online curriculum and class management strategies rather than leave it to the last minute. It will give students and parents time to prepare mentally for the difficult task of continuing online school. Most importantly, it will ensure we all continue to do our part to protect our community by reducing social interactions. I don't recommend the delay of school because anyone wants that to happen. In my opinion, is what needs to happen for the best interest of our students, our teachers, and our school staff, and our community. This is a marathon, and we're still in the thick of it. We will get through it with courageous leadership, a sense of community, and an acceptance of the reality we're faced with. Thank you for your time. David Wolf, PhD.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
You're welcome.
All right, any others? Nope. All right, would a board member, moving on to agenda adjournment, would a board member like to make a motion to adjourn the special meeting?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.